morning, everybody, or good afternoon, and welcome to CELPIP Live. This week, I'm going to be your temporary host. My name is Neil, and I'm glad that everyone has been able to join us today. Today, we've got a very special episode. We have Brandy, and she's going to be talking about note-taking skills for the CELPIP test. But first, I'd like to share this week's trivia question. So, as always, feel free to respond in the comments or in the chat if you know the answer, or if you want to just take a guess. This week's question: what is the most popular fruit eaten in Canada? The most popular fruit. So if anyone wants to take a guess, I'll be sharing the answer to that trivia question at the end of the show. So now let's introduce our guest today, Brandy. Hello, Brandy.
Hi, Neil. It's wonderful to be back. It's been a couple months, I guess, since I've been on the show, and this is the first time you and I get to work at the front end of the screen together. So it's really nice to have you here with us today. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much. I'm thrilled to be here, and as always, we're really happy to have you here to walk us through today's subject.
Yeah, thanks. Right. So I've got a pretty intensive practice session to do today, all about note-taking. So I'd like to share my screen here, if I may.
Absolutely.
Okay. Perfect. I'm just going to start the presentation. And as Neil introduced, we are going to be diving fairly deeply into the subject of note-taking. So for the next 40 minutes or so, here's the plan. We're going to first of all talk about what types of information we should be listening for when we're completing the CELPIP listening test. And then we're going to actually practice together taking notes on our note paper to capture these important concepts. So I hope you've got paper and pen somewhere nearby, because I'd really love for you to practice the skill with me today. So once we have finished taking our notes during the session, we're going to use our notes to answer 3 different CELPIP test questions. Okay, so by the time we're finished today, I hope you're going to leave with some confidence about which method of note-taking works best for you. So before we actually listen to the conversations today and practice those note-taking strategies, I do want to briefly introduce the CELPIP listening test. So when you complete this part of the test itself, you will have 6 different listening parts to do. So 6 different conversations. It's important to note that the audio you hear only ever plays once. There's no chance to pause it or to replay it. So we have to listen very carefully, of course. And then the questions we answer always come after the audio has finished. And this is why we say it's really important to take notes while you're listening, so that you can recall those important details later on to answer those questions effectively. You'll be given paper and pen in the testing room anyway, so you can use those materials to take your notes. Now, the questions for the CELPIP listening are going to become increasingly more complex as that test moves forward. So the test is designed this way specifically. And what I mean by that is, in listening part 1, you'll probably notice that the vocabulary is a little bit more common. Maybe the sentences that the speakers are speaking in are a little shorter and a little simpler as well. And then by the time you get to the end of the CELPIP listening test, part 6, you'll notice the vocabulary is much more complex. Again, the sentences are longer. The types of questions might be a bit more complex too. So for today's practice, I thought we could pick one right in the middle. We're going to focus on listening part 4 to do our note-taking and listening practice today. So listening part 4 on CELPIP is always about listening to a news item. So in this case, you're going to have one speaker only. There's no video. There are no pictures. It's literally one person speaking to you through the headset that you're wearing during the test, like a news reporter, if you will. So just like the title says, it's listening to a news item. So imagine, turning on or streaming your news, or turning on the TV, if you still do that, and listening to a news reporter give you information about a current event. That's more or less what we're doing here for listening part 4. So as I said just earlier, we'll hear the report only once. And the whole report itself will be about 1.5 minutes long. The questions will come after the report finishes. And for listening part 4, we'll have about 5 questions to complete in total. So of course, then we have to choose the best answer from the list, and hopefully we'll get them correct. So just to introduce the concept of listening today, and to warm up our ears, so to speak, I'm going to play just a very brief introduction from this news report. I'm literally going to play the first 23 seconds All I'd like for you to do right now at home, please, is just sit back and relax. You don't have to write anything down quite yet. I just want you to listen very carefully. And after you've heard this introduction, I'm going to show you on my screen one official CELPIP test question, and I'm going to see if you can answer it correctly based on what you've just heard. So I'm challenging your listening skills, I guess, first thing. Are you ready? Here's the clip right now. Let's listen.
The local health authority has posted no swimming signs at Lake Marvelous. The swimming prohibition has been issued in addition to the existing ban on fishing in the lake, which was announced last year. Michael Smith of the Chamber of Commerce noted that the prohibition comes at a bad time because the summer is just starting and many local businesses depend on tourist spending.
Okay, so that's the first piece of this entire news report. Here's the question. Can I take I'll give you about 15, maybe 20 seconds. Read it through at home, please, and see if you can answer it on your own at home. I'll reveal the answer in about 15 seconds. Okay, so how many of you at home answered D? This is technically the correct answer to this question, but how many of you at home were probably feeling like this when you were presented with this question and this answer? I know I was. The lesson or the takeaway that I'm trying to prove here is even though we just only heard 23 seconds of a news report, we were presented with so many details to remember that if all we do is sit back and listen, and we don't take the time to write down a few notes, it's really, really difficult to remember the important details that we need to make sense of these answers. Can you imagine sitting back and listening for a full minute and a half and then trying to remember all of these details? I think that would be very difficult for even the most seasoned practice or language proficient user. So again, step number one is let's take notes, regardless of how strong our listening skills are. We all should be writing down some important ideas to help us later on with those questions. But the question then becomes, well, how? We always say take your notes, but how do they look on the note paper? This is the next challenge. We know we only hear the audio one time, so we're not going to have time to write down every single word. If you don't believe me, let's test out that theory right now. I'm going to take that same clip that we just listened to, but I'm going to cut it in half. I'm going to play the first 13 seconds only. And this time I would like for you to try writing down at home as many words as you can possibly capture from the beginning of this man's report. Okay, you've got your paper, your pen, write down the words that you can, as many as you can in these 13 seconds. I'm only going to play the clip once. Here we go.
Local health authority has posted no swimming signs at Lake Marvelous. The swimming prohibition has been issued in addition to the existing ban on fishing in the lake, which was announced last year.
Okay, so how'd we do? How many words did you get down on your note paper if you chose to practice this? If you captured every single word, this is what you would right now have on your note paper. And I'm going to suggest that that's probably not possible for any of us. Although this man is speaking at a comfortable speed for English, our hand is just not designed to move along as quickly. It's not going to be possible for us to capture down complete sentences or even complete words. So the strategy or the process, I guess, we need to really practice at home is really quickly understanding which words are the important ones that we need to identify as we hear them, and which of those words then should we be writing down on the note paper. Okay, so again, we have to let go of the words that aren't so important. It becomes a skill to distinguish between the important words and the not so important words. So what I'd like us to do is just look at this transcript, if you will, on the screen. These are the words the man just spoke to us. Can all of you please do a very quick skim read over these couple of sentences on screen and see if you can decide which word or words are the key points, the key details. Which ones do you think would be most helpful for you to try to write down on your note paper so that you can have them in front of you later on when those questions arrive? So I think if we take about 15 or 20 seconds, gather some thoughts, I encourage you to please write down some of your ideas in the live chat right now. Neil can read out any of your ideas that come in. Again, there are, looking at this list, I'd say there's about 5 different sections that I would consider to be quite important. So I'm curious to see if you're identifying the same key points that I think also are important. So again, let's take some time. I hope we've got some participation in that live chat today. We'll give it a few moments and see if we get any answers. And then, as I say, Neil can read out a few.
Hi, Brandy.
Hello.
So Pulkit has mentioned both the no swimming signs and the ban on fishing.
Perfect. Yep, you've got two of the key details. Absolutely. I had both of those noted as well. There are a couple other ones I'd probably add. Do we have anything else?
Yeah, so Samir has shared that it was announced last year.
Yep, that one I had too. There are two other details that I had. Can we find them?
All right.
We'll give it 10 seconds, and if not, I'll reveal. I'm impressed how quickly those details were identified. This is awesome.
Good work, everybody.
Yeah, I mean, this is hard. This is a hard skill. So this is why we do it piecemeal. Okay, any last minute guesses there?
I think that's it.
Okay, so I'm going to show on my screen what I thought were the key points. So I just went and highlighted in yellow. So of course we can refer to them easily. So you'll notice those three details that you gave are absolutely listed here. I also added in the health authority right at the top, and I included Lake Marvelous in the second line. I did feel that those details might be handy later on by the time we get to the end. Okay, so looking at these yellow words on screen, these are the keywords. Can we as a group decide what types of details are we looking at? I mean, if you had to classify or categorize these particular details, what could you call them? Do you understand what I'm asking? So think about some of the language study maybe you've done. What do all of these words sort of have in common? What group do they fit into? There's a very particular way of thinking about this that I think will help you with your notes. And I'm hoping that you're recognizing these as the 5 W's, right? The 5 W's are the who, what, where, when, and why of any situation. So if we just look back at the words we've identified here, right at the beginning, we're given the who of the whole situation. It's the health authority. This is the organization that's presenting this information to us. So I think that's important to note. We might have a question later on all about them. We already identified the main point of this entire report. It's all about no swimming signs. And I think it's helpful to notice where. So those no swimming signs went up at the Lake Marvelous. So we have a who, a what, and a where. We have an extension of the what, right? There is also a ban on fishing. And I chose to include this word existing because this ban on fishing came into effect last year. There's the when, but the no swimming signs are being posted right now. So I thought that was an important fact to distinguish. So again, it's a who, a what, a where, I guess another what, and a when. The only thing missing from this little introductory clip that we just heard is the why. So we still don't yet know why these no swimming signs have been posted at Lake Marvelous, but I'm quite certain as we listen to the rest of this news report, that reporter will probably tell us why, right? So again, anytime we hear a detail that could be considered one of these 5 W's, I would encourage you to try very hard to record those specific details down on your note paper. And as soon as you do it that way, you're basically cutting down the writing in half. So this on the screen represents the entire speech we've heard. And as soon as we work just with the 5 W's, we've whittled down that list to about half the information. So it's a little bit more manageable, but we're not done yet. We're going to work more with these 5 W's to try to decide how to actually organize them on our page. Okay, so imagine this is what, 10 or 12 seconds of speech, and we've just thrown all the 5 keywords here up on our screen. Imagine listening for a minute and a half and writing down all of your words like this on your screen. There's no organization. It's impossible to look at this list and determine where one idea begins and ends and the next idea starts. So I think another effective strategy we could use for note taking would be to point form these ideas. So we're taking the exact same words. I haven't changed any of the language. These are the 5 key points we've identified. All we've done is we've listed them down the page now. And we chose to put you could put bullets here if you'd like, or you could use dashes. Whatever works for you is fine. But I'd recommend you have some sort of a symbol that, again, very quickly tells your eyes that this is where the new idea begins. And the brain actually chunks information better when you list details in a vertical line from top to bottom. So that's what we'll go with here. Okay, so I think it's helpful, again, to listen for 5 W's, to point form those ideas. This is an improvement. But I think if we're writing full words like so on our note paper, we still might not have enough time to capture all the details we'd like to. So the next step, our third strategy, is going to be to try to come up with some short forms. We call them abbreviations. You can use symbols and pictures. There's a lot you can do to represent these words on your note paper in a way that makes sense to you. So for health authority, the word authority is quite long, and I don't want to take the time to write the whole thing out. So if these were my notes and I was listening on the test, I might choose to just condense that word with the capital letter A, period. So later on, when I look back at my notes and I see health A, I think I'll remember that that means health authority. So that might make sense. And if so, you can certainly use it. I think even if we got rid of the word health and used a symbol. So some of us equate health with the heart, right? Strong heart, it's a strong health for the body. So later on, if you feel that this is enough to remind you that this is the health authority we're talking about, that's all that you need to do. So that you can imagine it would be very quick to write this down on your page. So that's just one idea or one way to capture that key point. The word no swimming signs. Let's see, can I open it back up to our viewers here? I think the word no is very short, yes, but I think there's probably a very common symbol or even letter that we could use instead. Anytime we have a detail that means, no, don't do this, it's a negative thought. Can you suggest right now in the live chat very quickly how you might represent that negative idea on your note paper? Be as short as you can. Think of something that would be so fast to draw on your page. Are there any ideas there? Maybe Neil can read out the first one that comes in. I'm guessing we'll all have the same idea, but I don't know. So we'll give it a moment and we'll see. How do you represent no? Rather than write it out, what could you do instead, I guess, is what I'm asking. No swimming signs. What would that look like on your notes? Got some ideas.
All right, Amir has shared with us the letter X.
Absolutely. That's the most logical one that popped into my mind, and I'm guessing most of you would have done the same. For swimming, oh, sorry, yep. Anything else?
No, go ahead.
Okay,
no.
For the word swimming, I don't think we need that whole word. I think if we just use the root verb swim, I think that would be more than enough. So no swimming could be captured like so. And the word signs, I mean, you could write the whole thing if you really have the time, but why not shorten that down even further? So something like that, SGN period, is enough. If you looked over here and came back to it a minute and a half from now, you'd know that meant no swimming signs, I'm pretty sure. So that's one way to do it anyway. This one for Lake Marvelous. There's a couple ways you could do it. I suppose you could just use the capital letter L with Marv to represent the short form. Some of us instead might actually take the time to write the word lake and use the capital letter M. So again, play around with it. Use whatever works for you. Just make sure you remember what these ideas mean later on. That's key. Okay, this one, existing ban on fishing. It's an important idea, but it's also quite long. We don't want to take the time to write the whole thing out. So for existing, let's chop off the ending of that word and go with the root. We could remove the word on. It's just a little preposition, so it's not that important. And same with the word fishing. Let's just get rid of the ending of that word. So something like this, I think, would represent existing ban on fishing. And last but not least, announced last year. I don't think I really need the verb at all. As long as I write these ideas side by side, or one beneath the other, I guess. I know that it was last year that the ban on fishing was put into play. So that would be quick. Even faster is maybe just using a symbol. So for last year, if I put an arrow pointing backwards, at least for me, that seems to make logical sense. So again, this is just one way to shorten up these ideas. There are so many. Your notes might look very different from my notes or somebody else's notes, and that's perfectly fine. The notes do not count for your score and they're only seen by you. So provided they make sense to you, that's really all you can do for yourself. What I'm going to do now before we move on is I would just like to play that same 13-second audio clip we've already heard, but I'd like us please to look at the notes on the screen as they're written, just to make sure we understand what these shorthands mean and that the ideas make sense. Okay, so here we go.
The local health authority has posted no swimming signs at Lake Marvelous. The swimming prohibition has been issued in addition to the existing ban on fishing in the lake, which was announced last year.
There, so lots of details, and I think we've captured them fairly well. So to recap, we started off for listening for those key points. These were the key points that we identified initially, but this takes too long to write. We won't have time to write the full word. So that's why we just took a moment to figure out how we might use short forms and symbols instead. So again, we sort of cut the amount of writing in half, which is absolutely necessary when you're taking notes on this test. Okay, so again, we listen for the five W's, key points, use our point form, and use short forms and symbols. And we're going to apply those key strategies for every type of note that we take. So here's one way that your notes might look on this test or in day-to-day life. If you're taking notes at work for a meeting, you might choose to use this option as well. It could work in the real world too. So I would just call this listing, right? We've listed all ideas from top to bottom for the entire audio clip. Now, you should recognize now the top 5 ideas are the ones we've already discussed. And I went ahead and finished that list for the entire minute and a half of the audio. So this is option 1, just a giant list of point formed ideas. And that might work for you. You might choose to actually take notes that way. It's fine for this section. Here's a couple other ways you could choose to practice and see what works best for you. So some people are visual learners and they actually like to connect ideas like so in a circle. So you might choose to actually draw your circles on your note paper, label them with the who, what, where, when, and why. And then when the speaker's talking and you're identifying these 5 W's, you'll know exactly which circle to put those details into. So you can imagine later on when you have your questions to answer, you'll know exactly which circle to look in for your ideas. So it could help to keep you organized. That's one way to do it. Other people might prefer to look at a chart with columns if your style is more from top to bottom and left to right. So that could be effective as well. So we've already practiced a little bit with the listing idea. So let's put that option aside just for a moment. What I'd like to do right now is continue the conversation or continue the news report. I'm going to play the next 25 seconds of this man's news report. And what I'd like us all to try at home right now, please, is practice taking notes using the circular chart. So as I'm talking right now to introduce this, feel free to write out or draw out those 5 circles on your note paper. Please label them with who, what, where, why, and when. Okay, you'll get your notes all set up. So again, I'll play this section of the conversation. We'll be listening specifically for these 5 W's. And when we hear them, we're going to write them into the correct section of the chart itself. Remember to use short forms as well as best you can. And I guess I should have said earlier, make your circles large enough so you can actually fit in some details, right? You don't want to cram everything in together. At any rate, I'll play this part of the audio now, and we'll see if this method of taking notes works well for you. Okay, here we go.
The health authority posted the no swimming signs as a result of several dead fish washing up on shore. A health authority spokesperson explained that they usually close beaches due to a high level of bacteria, which is generally due to sewage being discharged directly into the lake. About 100,000 Canadians get sick each year from swimming in polluted waters. They can suffer inflamed eyes, itchy skin, and even infection.
Okay, so that was it. That was 25 seconds. I know on the real CELPIP test, you only get to hear it once, and you have to capture whatever details you can manage. But because we're practicing together today, what I'd like to do right now is just play that clip one last time. So if you missed some of the details, now is your chance to catch them again, okay? Again, this won't happen on the real test, but I think we can do this today for practice. So here's that clip one last time.
The health authority posted the no swimming signs as a result of several dead fish washing up on shore. A health authority spokesperson explained that they usually close beaches due to a high level of bacteria, which is generally due to sewage being discharged directly into the lake. About 100,000 Canadians get sick each year from swimming in polluted waters. They can suffer inflamed eyes, itchy skin, and even infection.
All right, that would be it. So I'm hoping the first couple of details this man said right out loud are very similar. They're repetitive. He repeated the who of the situation. So remember in that first segment we listened to, we identified the health authority as the ones making this decision, and the man mentions them again. So it just took me a quick second really to write that in again under the who column. And again, he reminds us that it's the health authority that is mandating or putting up these no swimming signs on the beaches. So that was sort of a review anyway. Even if you didn't write these ideas down, that might be okay, since you've already got them from the opening part of this conversation. The next detail is crucial, though. He finally gives us a reason why these no swimming signs were posted on the beach. Did anybody catch the telltale sign? What happened on the beach? I'll open that up for the viewers now if you'd like to comment in the live chat, and we'll see if anybody has the right answer today. I guess Neil can share out any ideas that come in. But yeah, why? Why are these no swimming signs posted? What's happened? What did you write down under the why circle on your chart as you heard this at home? 2 words will do it, I think. Keep it short, keep it simple, but make sure it's correct. Give you a little more time. I know there's a delay as well when I ask these questions. So I'll give you about 10 seconds more. I'm hoping somebody has the answer for us.
Hi, yeah. So both Perfect Plate and Samir are saying dead fish.
Perfect. Perfect. Yeah, you absolutely have to have that detail, because if you don't, the rest of the news report might not make a lot of sense. So again, some details are more important than others. This one's crucial. So yes, there are dead fish washing up on beaches. I included that too. Anything?
Mina and Kakit are both saying bacteria due to sewage discharge, and then we've just got pollution as well.
Perfect. Yep. So all of those words make sense. So bacteria, sewage, pollution. So you decide how that's going to look on your notes. I think as long as you've captured that idea, that's all we can ask for. This is how I did it, like bacteria and sewage. That made sense to me. Again, it could be different from yours, and that's okay. But I thought that that was a really important idea to include. And we've labeled it under the why section, right? Because it's a reason why these no swimming signs are put up. So fantastic listening. Also, I'm impressed at your ability to pull out just the important pieces. We want to ignore all the other lesser important details and focus on the key points, right? There was one other detail that you might have had. I don't know for sure if you would consider it super important, but I remember at the very end of this conversation, or this segment, I guess, our news reporter gave us a statistic, and he said that each year in Canada, 100,000 people get sick. And he says the manifestation of those symptoms would include the eyes and the skin. They become quite infected. So that's not particular to this situation, right? So at Lake Marvelous right now, dead fish are washing up and no swimming signs have gone up. That's really important. We have to know that. This detail is more of a sort of an extension looking at generally across Canada. This is what occurs. So if you've got time to include that in the chart, great. It's maybe not as important as some of the other details. But I threw it into that section just because I thought, you never know, could have a question later on about this, so I'll leave it in. So far we're off on the right foot here. Everyone's got the right details, so that's great. Okay, now there are benefits of using the circular chart. I think first of all, you can imagine how much easier it will be later when we get to the questions. If you're being asked for reasons why the beach is closed, all you have to do is come back to your notes and look under the why circle, and you'll be able to find your answer a lot more quickly, right? Instead of looking at your big long list of ideas and trying to pull those details out. So the circular chart works well for that method. The challenge with it, though, are twofold. So first of all, it takes about maybe 6 or 7 seconds to actually draw this chart on your note paper. When you take your CELPIP listening test, you will always start each section with an instructions screen and an introduction screen. So if you're quick and organized while that instruction screen is showing, you will have time to make this chart on your note paper. So if that works for you, great. The challenge that I find, though, with this method is the speaker doesn't necessarily follow the order of the circles that you've labeled. So in this case, as you could see, the speaker gave us a who, a what, and then a why. So as you're listening, you're still identifying those 5 W's, but you also need to make a very quick decision as to which of these circles you're going to put that detail into. And adding that little step sometimes causes people a bit of anxiety. So if that's the case, we don't want to stress you out. We want to find a way to take notes that is easier for you. So let's finish off this news report. We've got about 23 seconds remaining. So we'll hear this man continue on where we left off. But this time, can we try this method just to see if it works any differently for us from home? So instead of, again, drawing those circles, could you take about 5 or 6 seconds right now, please, and just make a very quick chart? Doesn't have to be fancy, but give yourself space to include the who, what, where, when, why. I would label them just as you have on the top headings here. And then when we hear these details mentioned by the speaker, we'll be able to jot them into the chart under the correct column is the idea. Okay, so I'll play it for you now. Let's try to listen specifically for these 5 W's. Here we go.
However, because of the color of the water, blue-green algae is suspected. Almost all lakes have blue-green algae, but it can increase in shallow, warm, slow-moving lakes and become a serious problem because of toxicity. Until they do further testing, the health authority won't know for sure what the problem is. Meanwhile, there's no reason for alarm.
And that's it. That's it. That's all. Again, on the real test, you would hear it once. I will play it one final time just to give us more practice, as there were several details there. Okay, last time. Here we go.
However, because of the color of the water, blue-green algae is suspected. Almost all lakes have blue-green algae, but it can increase in shallow, warm, slow-moving lakes and become a serious problem because of toxicity. Until they do further testing, the health authority won't know for sure what the problem is. Meanwhile, there's no reason for alarm.
Okay, I'll start us off by saying there were only 2 columns here that we needed to focus on. That was the why and the what. We didn't hear any other details for the other 3, and that's fine. We only write down what we hear. So just to start us off, I'll suggest the reason why all of this talk about polluted water started, our speaker says, is because of the color of the water. So you can see my short form for that. That makes sense to me. Color is standard. I just was thinking back to my chemistry classes in high school, and I remember that H2O, of course, is the element or the symbol for water. So that just was fast for me to write. I don't know how you chose to write it down, but hopefully you've got a way that works for you. So the speaker says it's the color of the water that is leading the health authority to question if it's blue-green algae that is responsible for the water becoming polluted. So a couple things to note here. First of all, you notice that big arrow that I drew into my chart. This is why I actually enjoy working with a chart like this. I find it easy to jot down the ideas, but then draw arrows and circle things to connect them. For my learning style, that works for me. Maybe it works for you too. So try that out and see how that works. So you can see my shorthand for blue-green. I think that makes sense. The word algae, I chose to write the full word because it's not a terribly common word per se. And I was worried that later on, as I got to my questions, if I tried to use a short form for algae, I might not remember what that word meant. So I made a decision just to actually write the whole word down. Algae, by the way, is a plant that grows in most freshwater systems. It gives off oxygen and it also consumes carbon dioxide, and it forms the foundation of the food chain for the marine ecosystem. So there's your science lesson for today. So algae grows pretty much in most freshwater lakes. I chose to include a question mark too, and I think this is important because the health authorities aren't positive. They don't know for certain that the toxicity in the water is because of the algae, but they think it might be given the color of the water. So I think including that question mark here is actually quite helpful. So the speaker reminds us about algae, and he says, it grows naturally in most freshwater systems, but the speaker says when the blue-green algae grows too much, so you see my plus sign, that means too much, in shallow and warm lakes, he says that's when the water becomes polluted or toxic or whatever word you chose to write there. Okay, so again, you can see how all 4 ideas are connected, and I chose to use arrows to remind myself what this section of the conversation is all about. And then our speaker finishes off with a couple of other details. He says, first off, that more tests are needed. Remember, they're not certain it's the blue-green algae that's causing the pollution. So more tests are needed, he says. But he reassures us that there's no cause for alarm. So I thought I'd include that at the bottom just because I had time. It was the last detail I remembered him saying. So why not include it if we can? Okay, so here's what our notes look like for the section. And again, I think what I should do, maybe can I quickly play the audio clip one last time? I just want us to look at the notes as they're written and make sure that we can follow the train of thought so that they make sense. Okay, so here it is one last time.
However, because of the color of the water, blue-green algae is suspected. Almost all lakes have blue-green algae, but it can increase in shallow, warm, slow-moving lakes and become a serious problem because of toxicity. Until they do further testing, the health authority won't know for sure what the problem is. Meanwhile, there's no reason for alarm.
Okay, so I think we've got the details that we need done there. So of course, whichever method you choose to use for your own test, you're going to stick with the same format all the way through, right? So if listing top to bottom all the way works for you, that's how you'll complete the entire audio clip. If you want to use this chart, you would do so for the entire conversation. So we practiced the 3 different formats, namely the list, the circle chart, and this column chart, just to give all of you some exposure to different ideas. So what I'd like for you to do in the days and weeks to come as you're studying at home is try all 3 of these methods and decide which one does work indeed for you. But whichever method you've chosen, hopefully you've got some effective notes in front of you. And we're now going to use the notes that we've made today to answer 3 different test questions. Okay, again, these were all once upon a time real CELPIP test questions, just so you know. This test is no longer live, so you'll never see these questions in the future tests, but they once did exist in past tests, which is why we're able to work with them today. So we've got here our circular chart on the screen, as you can see. We're going to answer question number 2. And question number 2 here says, the prohibition was motivated by. Prohibition is just a fancy word meaning you can't do this. It's sort of like a ban. So the prohibition in this particular report is all about the closing of the beaches, meaning we're not allowed to swim there. That's what that means. So think of this question like that. The closing of the beaches was motivated by, and you've got your 4 answers. So I'm going to give you a good 20 seconds or so, maybe more, we'll see, to have you look at your choices and try to answer this by yourself at home. Use the notes that you made or the ones on screen. And when you're ready, see if you can enter your guess into the live chat box. We'll get Neil to read them out, and we'll see if we can agree upon what answer we think to be correct. The prohibition was motivated by. So what caused the closing of those beaches, in other words? See if you get the right answer.
Okay, so Jidden has shared that he thinks it's the first answer, the appearance of dead fish.
Okay. So I won't confirm or deny quite yet. Might be the right answer.
Yep, we've got a few more people who are all agreeing that it's the first option.
Okay.
Option A.
Okay.
The dead fish.
Dead fish is a winner today, sounds like. All right, well, let's talk it through. Dead fish seems to make a lot of sense because when we look under our notes under the Y column, lo and behold, we wrote those words down. I think the speaker actually used those exact words. That's why we wrote it down. So dead fish is listed there. And when we look back at the way the question's written, it would read, the prohibition or the closing of the beaches was motivated by the appearance of dead fish. So I'm 99% certain that's probably the right answer. I'm just going to mark it quickly with a little question mark for now because I just want to look at the other ideas just to make sure we've not misunderstood anything. So when I look at option B here about the recent water quality tests, the end of the conversation mentioned that more tests were needed anyway. So we haven't done any tests yet on the water. That doesn't make any sense at all here. And looking at the remaining 2 options, this bottom one about reports by fishermen, well, fishermen were not mentioned, period. We have no recollection of hearing that word, nor did we include it into our chart under the WHO column. So let's just get rid of that idea altogether. The only remaining possibility was complaints by swimmers, and some of us might have recalled that stat that the reporter gave to us, talking about all these Canadians getting sick every year. But remember that statistic is referring in a general sense about cross-country swimming. It doesn't have any bearing on this situation at Lake Marvelous with the closing of this particular beach. So we can't go with complaints by swimmers. It's not particular enough for this situation. So answer choice A is the only one remaining. So it's definitely the most logical choice. I think most of us, again, felt that way from the beginning, but we just confirmed it by looking at the other options. So yeah, that is the right answer. We got lucky in the sense that the words dead fish are right in the answer choice itself. And we had the exact words dead fish right in our notes. So that's easier, right? When that happens, sometimes we can do a direct match for vocabulary. Not all the time though. So just be aware that you might have the words written one way in your notes. You might have synonyms and paraphrased ideas in the answer choices. So just make sure you're matching the ideas up, not necessarily the individual words. All right. But again, this one was a little bit easier for us in the sense that we had those words in front of us. Okay, let's skip over to question 4 now, 4 of 5. And you can see now that I've got the little column chart on the screen because this is that part of the audio that we need. We only wrote ideas under the what and why column, so that's why I've only included those here on the screen. So question 4 says, authorities suspect algae, remember that plant, because of, and you've got your 4 answer choices. So again, can I give you a good 15 or 20 seconds to see if you can answer this first by yourself? I'll invite you to share your guesses into the live feed, and then we'll talk about it and make sure we've got the right answer. So look at your notes, look for keywords. Be on the lookout for synonyms too, maybe. Let's see if you can answer this on your own.
Okay, we've got a couple of people jumping in saying that it's number 2, option number 2, or B, the color of the water.
Color of the water, okay. Well, I think that's a logical way to think of it in the sense that our question says because of, right? So really we're looking for a reason. So we should be looking at the why column anyway. And the very first detail we wrote under the why column is it's the color of the water that is making authorities question if the blue-green algae is to blame. So when you look back now at all of your questions and answer choices, we've got the word algae right in the question. And as you say, answer choice B says the color of the water, which is another almost direct match from the way we recorded it in our notes. So for answer B to be correct, the whole sentence would read, authorities suspect algae because of the color of the water. And then look back to our notes. It's exactly what we wrote down. The color of the water leads authorities to suspect blue-green algae is to blame. So it's exactly the same idea, just sort of reversed in order. So yeah, this again was an easier question in the sense of a direct match if you're looking just at the vocab. And again, looking at the remaining options here, the condition of the fish, some of us might have chosen that, because we had all those dead fish washing up on shore. But remember, that's what prompted the beaches to be closed. It had nothing to do with the algae. So that's my reasoning there. But yeah, looking at the nature of the infections, no, that has nothing to do with the algae. The results of the test, well, the test never happened. Remember, we still have to do tests. So yeah, it's the color of the water that leads authorities to suspect the algae. So for sure, answer choice B is correct. So well done. It looks like everyone got that one too. Last but not least, we'll finish up here today with the remaining question. This is question 5 of 5. So you can see this one is a larger scope. It's a general meaning question. It says the primary purpose of the report is to, and then you've got those 4 purposes listed as your answer choices. So what I put onto the screen here is actually the giant list from top to bottom. So we've heard all of these ideas now. We wrote them down in different structures, but we're going back to the list that I made summarizing these details. So have a look through this list on the screen. Remind yourselves about what this whole report is all about, and then see if you can decide which of the 4 answer choices just makes the most sense. So what's the whole purpose of this report anyway? That's what you're trying to figure out. So again, feel free to guess in the live feed there when you're ready, and we'll make sure we all have the answer before we log out.
All right, we've got lots of folks jumping in to say option A, to inform.
Okay, that was quick. Yeah, well, looking at the list itself. Like, we know that this whole report is all about beaches being closed because fish are dying. Authorities suspect blue-green algae because of the color of the water, and it's making the waters toxic, we suspect. But more tests are needed to be sure. But we shouldn't panic. So that's kind of the gist of it. So when I look back at the 4 answer choices, informed does seem to make a lot of sense. I mean, in no way is the speaker critiquing anything. He's not casting the finger of blame at any one person or authority. So yeah, he's just pretty much giving us the facts of the case. This is what's happening and where and why. And the whole reason for doing that, we can assume, is just to keep us safe so that we don't end up swimming in polluted water and getting sick ourselves, right? So there's no way this report is there to entertain us. There's nothing remotely entertaining about dead fish and bacteria in the water. Prohibit is a tricky word because we've heard it several times in the conversation, and we also saw the word prohibition in the last question. Some people might have just assumed then that it could be the answer, given that you've heard it a few times now. But the word prohibit, remember, means that you can't do something. So if we put that answer up in the statement above, it would read, the primary purpose of the report is to prohibit. And the report itself is not preventing us from swimming. It's the health authority that's made that announcement. It's the health authority that is prohibiting swimming in the beach. So we have to just be a little bit aware of the meaning of these words. Yeah, inform just makes sense. We're hopefully going to stay safe because we now have the details and the facts. So that's a general meaning type question that involves using all the information and not just one little part of your notes. But well done. Sounds like we've all done have the hang of using notes to find answers. So that's a good sign. Okay, so just to wrap up what we did here today, I think, again, as you continue to study at home, as I said before, try out all these 3 methods of note-taking. Really doesn't matter which one you use as long as it works for you. So when you come in to do the CELPIP test, I'm hoping you already know exactly which way you'll take notes, whether that's listing all ideas, trying a circular chart, or maybe making that column chart as well. Always listen for your keywords. I think that's one of the most helpful things. Identify those 5 W's to the best of your ability. Use point forms somehow to organize those notes on your page, but you have to keep the notes short. Use short forms, use symbols, do what you need to do to capture that idea briefly in a way that you'll remember what that idea means later. Okay, once you've got your notes in front of you, as we did today, you'll then look at the questions and answer choices and try to identify the keywords there. You'll then scan through the notes to try to locate those key ideas. So 2 of our questions today, we found a direct match for language. And in that final question we practiced, we had to just use our own logical sense to understand the meaning of the report. But you're always on the lookout for matching up ideas, sometimes using synonyms and paraphrased ideas as well. Okay, so using your reason, using your notes you've taken, you're going to select then the best answer from the list. And if you're still not sure, try to eliminate some of the answers that you know to be wrong. We did that a few times today. So if you can even eliminate 2 choices and you only have 2 answer choices left to pick from, you could always guess if you really had to, right? You'd have a 50-50 chance at that point of guessing correctly. And you never lose points for guessing wrong anyway, so you've got nothing to lose. If really you don't know the answer, answer something. You might actually get it right. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen here now and just come back to everybody today. See if I can find this. There we are. If you have any remaining questions about note-taking in particular, I can answer them today before we log out. We'll see how we go here. All right. I know we did quite an in-depth session, so you might actually not have a lot of questions left, but we'll see if we have any left to answer at all. Doesn't look like any. You can also, as well, as you're thinking through the rest of today, if there's a topic that you really want some more help with, maybe in reading or speaking or writing, feel free to let us know, because I'm very happy to put together a little practice session to give you more guidance on the skills that you need to. All right, so I don't see any other questions. So I think I'll throw it back to Neil, but I think we're good to go here.
I think so. Thank you so much, Brandy.
Yeah, my pleasure. It's always fun working with everybody on CELPIP Live. And I have to say, I'm very impressed. I should have said earlier, I can't see the private chat box when I'm presenting, which is why I rely on Neil to share. But I'm just so impressed with how quickly everybody could identify those key points and answer the questions. That was listening part 4, which is where the test really starts to shift up in complexity. So the fact that you're all answering so quickly, that's a really good sign. So I encourage you to keep practicing. So thanks so much for your participation today.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Brandy.
All right. We'll see you next time.
We'll see you next time. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for all of your comments. I would just like to share our trivia answer from the beginning of the show. So our question from the beginning of the show was, what is the most popular fruit eaten in Canada? And the answer is the banana. So if you guess banana, I think I saw someone say blueberries in the chat, which is close, very close. Blueberries are very popular here in Canada, but not as popular as the banana. And before we leave, I would like to share again that we currently have an exciting offer for test takers from the National Bank of Canada, where if you go to their website, nbc.ca/CELPIP offer, you can get a $280 cash back when you open a new account to help you pay for your CELPIP test. So again, that's a great opportunity for test takers to get their CELPIP test paid for. And that's all we have for today. So again, thank you everybody for joining us. And thank you for joining Brandy, and I hope everybody found the session very helpful today. I know I did. So thank you all, and see you on the next stream. Bye, everybody.